Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Full-Time Investor. I am standing up today because I feel great and I'm sharing that energy with you. I'm coming to you for another episode of The Full-Time Investor. I am Mandy Brenham, aka the Joint Venture Queen, here in 2020, living out a great year so far. So what a great show I've got planned for you today. And I have to admit right up front, my guest today, I've been a guest on his show, roles reversed. Glen is the expert in Canadians who invest in the US. And I'm a little bit selfish in this episode because I want to pick his brain for as much information as I can. Shoot us some questions if you've got some specific questions that you want to know how a Canadian can invest in the US and get some of those things clarified so that we can get investing in the US. Larry, bring on my guest today. Where is he?
Hello, I'm here.
How are you?
I'm great.
Thank you so much for being here on my show this week. You had me on yours. I had some great reviews, and I was like, let's do this. And look in the background there. You've even got your sign that says Canadian investing in the U.S. I love it.
Yeah, that's you get that little sneak peek because that actually doesn't. I pre-record my shows, so that doesn't come out until episode 100, which hasn't happened for a couple more weeks. Yeah.
Look at that sneak peek right here. That's why Glen, you are the expert. I want to just be able to get people on the same page. Who are you as a Canadian and why did you get investing into the US? Just tell us a little bit about your backstory.
I guess backstory, I was investing in Ontario. I had, I think, 7 properties in Cambridge and a property in Strathroy. And I started doing distance investing with Strathroy, and once I got comfortable with that, I was like, why can't I go farther? I was also starting to have problems with banking in Canada, where they weren't as happy to give me money. Yeah. So it started getting a little bit more difficult, and so that's why I've moved most of my business down to the U.S. I still have a little bit here, but it's getting smaller.
Yeah, some people will say, well, I want to go to Nova Scotia or I want to go to Alberta. So what made the decision to go across the border?
Well, going to the landlord-tenant board is not my favorite thing in the world.
Woo! You had me at hello.
Yeah, so that I dealt with that many times now, and I'm not really that excited with that. And I was just looking for what really appealed to me was lower cost of entry, so really cheap properties that you could have, like the 2% rule. So you could buy like a $50,000 property that would rent for $1,000. That's really. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen here, but it's very difficult to find.
Okay, so then let's see. So again, I'm going to be pretty selfish in this and ask you like questions that are ticking in my brain here. Okay, Glen, there's 300 million people in the United States, which means there's a lot of cities. How do you just decide on which city, which town, which state to be able to, for you or for our audience, just to be able to start out in?
So whenever I was making this decision off the start, there was a lot of things I was kind of factoring in. First of all, I was having problems with landlord-tenant board, and it's partially my own fault. I'm probably not as good a screener as I could be, and it's something that I should farm out because it's not something I shouldn't be part of. So, but based on that, I wanted landlord-friendly states. So I went through, and you can Google it, and you can find the top 10 landlord-friendly states. It's on every Google search anyway. Yeah. So I went through and basically, I've got it down to like 15 states because it's really 15 really good ones. And so got it down a little bit. I wanted to look at vacancy rates on the state websites, which is all public knowledge. There's a lot more public knowledge in this, or like information on the states. You can go to a school and figure out the ethnicity of how many kids are in each school. It's crazy how much public knowledge is out there. To take advantage of. I wouldn't pick any real estate based on that, but I was just giving an example. So vacancy rates for the things, landlord laws, property taxes, because it varies a lot from state to state, and people don't usually even factor in the property taxes. I can go down to Alabama and get a 4-bedroom, 2-bath for like $600 a year for property taxes, or I could do the same thing in Indianapolis and it'll be like $1,200, and you can go to like, and it changes from, you go to the same thing in California and it's like $8,000, right? It's it varies, right? And it's the same sort of, you got to factor some of these things in, because it is part of your sheet of how much you're going to make. It's part of your pro forma. So I also look for states that can support the 1% rule. So you can rule out some of those like really sexy states like Colorado, because it is, I'd love to buy in Colorado. It has a lot of good landlord laws, but it's expensive, right? And so as prices get higher, the ratio, what you can get for rent, gets lower, right? So it's the same thing applies here in Ontario. If you're going to have like a $50,000 house, you can probably charge a lot of rent and get up over the 1% rule here too, right? It's just really hard to find those properties. Right. But if you go down to places that has that, and as like I was sort of lost my train of thought there, but with the ratios, if you're going to go buy something in New Jersey and it's going to cost $500,000, you're not going to be able to charge $10,000 a month for that. That's just not, it's not practical. So as it gets more expensive, the ratio gets worse usually.
So then here I am, and I'm like, I'm gonna step across the border, and I'm doing some research. Are there some, and I mean, Google's Google, okay? Like Google can have the right person come up on the ad list, and it can have the wrong person. So do you have any go-to websites that you use or have used to be able to say, this is a state that has the landlord friendly, that has a good vacancy, and that you can look at for tax percentage?
Yeah, so I think you just start with like a list, right? Because you're going to be attracted to a whole bunch, right? So you're like, oh, I want Florida, I want Arizona, I want all the sexy places. Maybe I'll put in a couple that are a little less sexy. I'll put in some Kentuckys or some Alabamas or some Ohios or some Missouris, right? But you start with a bunch of places, and you can just start cutting them off as they don't hit your criteria. But everybody's criteria is different, right? But the state websites have a lot of this information on it. They'll tell you like how much the ratio for a city, if it's renters or if it's renters or owners that own the properties. So you can break a lot of this stuff down. The other thing I also like is places that have large employers. And it's not like one large employer, because that's scary. Because if they go to business, the whole town's done. So I never want like one employer, the biggest employer, to be 20% of the employment. That's my general rule. Okay. And then I want population growth. And then when I'm picking specifics for neighborhoods, I want school zones and crime rates. And like I said, a lot of this is just I get from the state sites, but you sort of have to start with high level and work your way down. And a lot of those still sexy places like Florida and Arizona can work really well. The prices are a little bit higher than if you're going to go to Ohio or Alabama or something like that. But you can still do great things there, and people do.
Okay. And so how long would it have taken you, or for our audience, myself, be able to say, like, give yourself X amount of months, or to be able to do this research, find out all of this stuff that you're looking for before you take the leap?
Well, I have a podcast. So I was talking about this last night. I give it all away. The only thing I don't share is my contractors. Besides that, I'll tell you everything, how to do everything and everything. That's the secret sauce, is the contractors. Besides that, you can have it all. Like, I'll just tell you everything about all the markets I'm working in.
Awesome.
But what was the original question? Like, how do I?
Well, I was just gonna say, how long does it take for you to be able to decide to have a state? Yeah. Have a city, and then you're obviously like, how many trips? So here you are, let's just say that you've decided on 6 cities within various different states.
I think it's going to depend on how fast you want to move with it. Yeah. I personally, when I bought my property, the first one, I bought the property. I didn't have my corporate set up. I didn't have my ITINs. I didn't have anything set up. I just went for it, and then I figured it out. And then, like, I still closed into a corp. I still did all that stuff. And you can do a lot of these things very quickly, but I didn't. And I was like, I'd done so much research and like just listening to podcasts and stuff like, and I was just like, I'm going. And you know what? It might not be the right way to do it, because I was on vacation and it was stressful. I was running to like the little information booth to get them to print stuff, I'd scan it, I'd fax it, and I was trying to get all this stuff set up, which it may not be the way to do it, but a lot of stuff, you can figure it out after even. Like, I buy properties from foreclosures and from short sales and from other things, and sometimes they require you to close it in your own name anyway. Yep. So say you don't get all this stuff set up ahead of time, you go close it into your own name, you can do a quitclaim deed and put it into the corp that you want for $150.
You're speaking some gibberish to me right now, which I love, because it shows you that I'm a student right now and I'm seeking and I'm just soaking up all this information. So you're saying a few terms here. How about you describe? I love it. You're sharing, like, jump in, take some action. We're learning the lessons that you've learned to be able to share with us. So let's just say, in the perfect scenario, Mandy, don't make the mistakes that I made. Not that the mistakes led you to exactly who you are. I love you where you are right now. But if it was done optimally, or the best way, what do I set up? What is that I set up? Do I set it up in the States? Do I set it up in Canada? Who do I have to know? Who has to be involved?
If you're talking corporate structure, there's many ways to do it. Even every joint venture I do with somebody, we almost set up a different structure almost every time. The most common rule, though, to know is to don't go set up an LLC, because if you talk to an American attorney, they're going to say, set up an LLC and put your properties in, because that's what Americans do. But as a Canadian, you want to be in an LP. You can put it in LLCs underneath it, but you want an LP on the top. That's the basic general rule.
Is that set up in Canada? Or
that's in the U.S. You can have Canadian CPAs or Canadian lawyers do it for you too. It tends to be a little bit more expensive because they're really still paying someone in the States, so you're just double paying. But you can still do it from here. And that's the most simple structure, and that's the structure I use. I know a lot of several people anyway who are planning to go super, super big. And they've set up a Canadian corporation that owns a C Corp in the United States, which is the equivalent kind of to our corporation structure. There's an S Corp in the States, but we can't use it. So just forget that whenever you're reading or watching podcasts. It's not available for Canadians. So then they open the Canadian Corp owns the C Corp in the States, and then they put LLCs underneath that own the properties. Is another structure. And the reason people do that is to basically defer taxes. By putting the Canadian over top of the US, you don't get double taxed. If you just use a C Corp, you could be double taxed. There's a lot of ways to get double taxed. The LLC is the way to get double taxed if you just use that, because they're going to treat it as corporate income and personal income, and you'll get double taxed. Some people use the C Corp structure because they're doing flips and they're not taking the money out. So it's a way, if you're just going to leave the money there, that you're not going to, only going to pay tax on the Trump's 15%.
Okay. So I love it. Like, I love it. I was like, I got another question. So that was one of my big questions. Are you leaving? So we're going to convert Canadian to American to the structure that we've got it, put it in this bank account, or, however we are. Are you bringing Canadian, are you bringing American money back? Or are you, like, what's your plan? Leaving it in the States and building up this American reserve? I
leave my money. I treat my, I actually told this to the bank person yesterday. I treat my real estate like my RSP, because they're like, oh, do you have RSP contributions? I'm like, no. I'm not buying mutual funds. But anyway, I was like, but I leave it down there. But with the structure I use, using the LPs, it's personal money. I can write myself a check if I want to go, buy a car or whatever. I can write myself a check, and it's not like, because people get confused with it. They think they're used to the Canadian corporation structure, and they think of it as you're going to have to do a dividend. That's like a C Corp. If you have a C Corp and a Canadian corporation in there, then you're going to do dividends, and you can leave the money in and just be taxed at the low rate. This isn't like that. An LP and an LLC structure is a flow-through entity, which we don't have in Canada. There's no equivalent. So whenever you get the wall of the corporation, but the money flows through to your personal return. So it sounds, first you're like, well, I don't want to be taxed at personal return. It's all Canada. Like in the States, I file taxes, but I don't pay them any money, because they have so many more write-offs than we have in Canada. Like, the depreciation schedule is shorter, so they write off more money every month. And you write off the mortgage as well as the interest. And it's just, and then when you're buying stuff, it's always, because I'm always buying. We're just doing 10 units this month. We're always buying, so we're never paying taxes. buy till you die. As soon as you stop buying, then you're not going to have all those, setup fees and closing costs and everything else. Then you're going to start paying taxes. You just keep buying. There's never any taxes.
I love it. That's my mentality too. So a couple questions though, because we're getting these up on different feeds. An LP is a
limited partnership.
An S corp is a
I don't know. We can't use it anyway.
No. An LLC is
a limited liability company.
Okay. And I think we said S corp, but C corp. So just different names for these things?
Yeah, basically, if you're thinking of a C corp, it's the closest equivalent is the same as a Canadian corporation. It's very similar. I'm not an accountant or an attorney.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's similar.
Do you file taxes in the United States and file taxes in Canada?
Yes. So you file your U.S. ones first before you file your Canadian ones, because they give you a piece of paper that you put. It's basically just another form to fill in your Canadian taxes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's I said, it's a zero. I'm not paying any. I don't pay them money.
You don't pay them. You know what? Cash versus financing. So there we are. I know you talked about the 1% rule. You went down there and you said houses are much cheaper. You're anticipating going down there. You've got a HELOC on your house, so you've got $400,000 or $500,000, and you're paying cash for these houses. Am I correct?
I'm not.
No,
nope. People do. People do all the time.
Okay.
No, I don't. I bought my very first property cash, and then I refinanced it like 3 months later. I usually almost always use financing. I think I have 4 or 5 properties I own in cash, but I use financing every time. Everything. I finance everything. A lot of the options as a Canadian, you're not going to have you're not going to be walking into a Wells Fargo or a Bank of America and getting financing there, and that's what stops a lot of people is they think that's where you go, and they don't give us a loan, so I guess we can't do this. But if you have because if you go to the Canadian banks, so BMO Harris is down there, RBC Bank and TD Bank are in the United States. Okay. TD Bank only does certain states. They're kind of picky. They're only up the eastern seaboard. But you can go to these banks, and if you have, because they're going to treat it like a Canadian loan. Like you're going to have to still qualify based on debt service and all that stuff, whereas the American banks, you don't. But if you already have relationships and you still haven't maxed your stuff out in Canada, you can go use them the same way. I think Royal Bank, the thing is, they change the rules all the time. But last I heard, they were only willing to do 1 mortgage. TD was willing to do 3 or 5 mortgages. So for me, it wasn't a scalable model. I want to buy, I want many houses every year. Mm-hmm. So it didn't work for me. I've had a bank account at some of those banks, but I've never actually used them for mortgages. The main method I use for mortgages is hard money. Okay. So you end up paying a little bit more money, but
what's an interest rate down there right now?
6 to 8.
Okay.
So this is hard money though. This is not like institutional money. So this is like a kind of equivalent, like a private loan, but kind of governed. Like it has some rules, but it's a lot more flexible. They can do stuff that the banks can't do.
Is it secured on the asset that you're buying?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So it's a hard money loan, 6 to 8%. So you're going to this hard money loan guy. He's securing what? 80%, 70%? What kind of loan to value are you getting on your houses?
Typically, if you go to 85% of them, they're going to tell you it's 65% loan to value for a long-term 30-30 loan, like 30-year term, 30-year amortization. Okay. You're going to be probably 65%. There are lenders that will do 70 or 75. Be careful though, and make sure that you can they've confirmed it with underwriting beforehand, before they've promised you this, because I personally, when I was new, got the bait and switch where they would promise you this, then you would have a loan and documents that you've signed, but they just basically void them and be like, no, it's actually 65 now. And you've well, why would I use the other lender then? Because they were cheaper. And so, but verify it with underwriting that this has actually been verified, this loan, before you go and pay for appraisals and waste money on that stuff, because appraisals aren't transferable. Usually,
Okay.
like if the one company owns them, that company owns the appraisal. They're not going to let use someone else's appraisal. You can use that for like private lending and stuff like that to use those appraisals, but besides that, no one else wants them. They're not really helpful.
So you would then, as a Canadian with a HELOC or cash available or savings, however that works, you would potentially just be using or transferring over to American dollars into some sort of account the 35% down payment plus renovations, or are you borrowing the hard money for renovations at this point too?
Okay, so now we're talking about a different kind of lending. We're talking about a fix and flip loan or a fixed to rent loan. And when we're talking about those loans, you're now talking about 90% loan to value, and including the renovation. It's usually it changes from lender to lender, but it's usually 90% of the purchase price or 75% of the ARV. And what they'll loan.
So if we're talking $100,000 purchase price with $150,000 ARV with a $10,000 hard money loan.
I have to do some math in my head, but basically you could probably get you probably get the loan for like $90,000 ish, probably. The thing is, it gets a little tricky because sometimes they want some reserve money on top of that. They want you to show that you can make your payments for like 6 months. So you don't have to have your payments sitting in a bank account. So it's not like, oh, I'm just going to come up with $10,000 and do this. It's usually like for those kind of ones, you're looking at probably $20,000 you're going to have to put down to buy that kind of deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Greg is watching. He's got a couple questions here. He's looking at which structure would you suggest if he was going to wholesale? Is there a different structure for wholesaling in the States maybe than he does if he has to do a purchase? I think
contact my CPA, episode 91 and 22, or there's another one at 21. But I'm not a pro, but from what I gathered, if you're doing flipping, you want to use a C corp. The reason is that money's going in, going out. You're not really taking it. It's sitting in there, so that makes the most sense. And mostly use the LP structure. You can just use one LP. If you want to go a little fancier, you can have an LP with some LLCs underneath. You make one a general partner if you want to go into the second level structure. So you make LLC 1 have hold all of the liability for the corporation. So 99% of the corporation liability, 1% to the LP on the top, and then put all the properties in the other LLCs. That's the level 2 structure, but that's more for like a lot of properties. As a wholesaler, you could probably just use an LP, and that would probably be the cheapest way. You're going to pay like $500 to $700 and ready to rock. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to major plug here again, guys. Sounds like Glen's got just a library of knowledge and encyclopedia within those within your podcast. So definitely need to go and keep listening there. But I think you touched on something else. There's a lot of different laws in the States. Are you worried about being sued? Are there different laws for people who can come and take you and stuff like that?
Well, having the properties inside of some sort of liability structure, an LP, an LLC, or a C Corp, having them in something, at most, if they do get a judgment on you, I'm not a lawyer, again, but from my understanding, the most they're going to go for is they're going to have access, if they get a judgment because they got a judgment on that LLC, or I mostly have LLCs underneath my LLCs, so I always say LLCs. So they'll mostly be going for the LLC, right? And so if they have that, they could go after other properties and then in there. So you want really to be secure. It depends how comfortable you are. Put like a different LLC for every property. They're only like $500 to $700, so you can set up tons of them. You can actually do it yourself. You can set up these LLCs yourself online. I use a CPA. I want it done right, and I don't. If there's something does happen, I want it done right. And you can go set it up yourself for like $200, but I don't know if it's worth the risk.
I like it. Great advice. Absolutely, great advice. Hey, Deanna's asking, is that 90% loan to value structure that they'll lend on, depending on ARV, at the same interest rate, maybe 6 to 8%?
No.
Or are we looking at that? Okay.
No, my main lender, like if you want to talk to these lenders, send me an email and I'll just connect you to them. But my main lender in New Jersey, It's about 9% is the sort of the going rate. If you use my one in California, it's 10.5. They all have different advantages to why I use different ones. Some of them will guarantee the refi on the purchase,
Right.
because so they'll do like an appraisal, but the appraisal has the ARV in it, and they'll be like, whenever you're done, we'll check the box and you can go into the refinance without having to do another appraisal. And it's like locked in. So you're like, well, maybe I'll pay extra money for that. Maybe, you just have to weigh out what's important to you.
Okay. And can you use that loan to value to flip to yourself? So these are all properties that you are looking to be able to renovate, refinance, and rent out, or are you doing that structure to be able to sell? Like, how many do you sell compared to keep?
I keep almost everything.
Okay.
We're doing one flip right now. You know what? But my JVs, we were talking about it last night, and we still might keep it. Okay. But I like to keep everything. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was the question?
That's all right. Do you use that structure to do a flip to yourself, like the 9?
Oh yeah, so you can just refinance afterwards, right? So you can refinance. A lot of lenders will let you do it at 3 months, so you can refinance into a 30-30 right away. I don't usually do that. I usually wait till the 6-month period. The 6 month, the rates get better because it's like more risk. Like, you've hardly owned this property. Now you're trying to strip all the equity out. The rates will get better at 1 year, but 1 year's too long. I can't wait that long.
You're closing on 10 units this month. You don't wait too long. So then here I am again. I've decided to cross the border. I've decided on a state. I've decided on a city. How do I set up my team? I'm talking property managers, lenders. I know that you put out there that we can email you, so that's good. We'll be able to talk about lenders. But how many trips do you take down to the cities? What's your time that you've spent in these cities, in your properties? Just give us an idea on
that. I go down to Alabama every year. I'm going down to Ohio in March. We were in Kansas City in November. I typically, you don't need to do a lot of these unless there's a reason to go there. It depends what you're buying, right? Sometimes you don't need to go. I usually don't go. I have more than half my portfolio I've never seen before. I've never saw it. I've done like video walkthroughs, but that doesn't happen off the start, because you need to have someone trusted to go through them. And it's not just like, I'm going to go to Craigslist and get a contractor. I want to, you need to have somebody that's valid. Property managers, people always forget. A lot of them have in-house repair people, right? And you start thinking about it, depending on the level of construction you're doing, you could just use your property manager, right? Like, they have people that can do tiling and flooring, and because they fix it all the time, plumbing, all this stuff. It's whenever you're getting into structural, then you're probably gonna have to go a little bit farther. But I still like, not all the time though, like, but a lot of times I still, depending on the level of renovation, will just use the property manager. And so having that trusted.
How did you choose? Like, give me an idea. You went through 5, you found, the first one didn't work. The second one was okay. Every state obviously has a different property manager.
So if you ever want any of these names, I don't name drop when I'm talking on the show, but talk to me. But I originally hired a nationwide property manager. I'm like, this is going to be so easy. It's going to list all the properties. I'm going to be able to see the whole thing, different matters of the states. It's going to be awesome. The problem was, every time I called them, it was like calling your internet provider or whatever, and you sit on hold and you go through connections, and I was going mad because I hated to do that all the time, because they had a lot of problems with my bill off the start. And so it was just, and then you talk to a different person, and so I fired them. And so that's how you find these things, is you go through firing people. So you get good at firing people. So then I found a different property manager, which I was referred to from the turnkey operator in Huntsville. And I usually, the best ones are referrals. Like, that's how the whole world works. If you find someone who's actually doing it, and no one's ever going to be like, you can't have my property manager. Like, property manager, everyone shares a property manager. They won't share your contractors necessarily, but they're going to share the property manager. It's not like it's anything secret. So yeah, that's the easiest way to go. And then you can talk to a property manager. They can connect you with other people. Some of my property managers, they don't keep everything in-house. They hire contractors. This might be a little sneaky, but off the start, what I used to do is I just kept asking for bills, because you don't really need the bills because it's all on your statement, but I wanted hard bills. When you get hard bills, you figure out who the contractors are.
Yes, you do. Good little insight there. Absolutely.
Yeah, because you don't need them for taxes. It's all
okay.
itemized and stuff. You don't actually need them, but I'm like, I want to see the hard one.
Okay. Richard's asked here, do you buy properties from tax deeds in auctions?
No, at this point, no. I've been interested in it, and I had K.E. Ross on the show, and somebody else was talking tax deeds. Oh, Nolan Sandburn's been on the show to talk tax deeds, and it's very interesting. My honest opinion is sometimes what you're buying is like a major problem. Like sometimes they're a little bit more than I'm looking for.
Okay.
Some of them are a lot of renovation, a lot of renovation, but there aren't all, right? So if you can do some homework or whatever, but basically I would say you have to go there. You have to go to that. You don't want to do tax auctions. For instance, I had a property under contract from Wells Fargo, doing it as a foreclosure buy. And anyway, we went through, because it was foreclosure, we got access to the property before closing. We went through, had contracts to go through. They found $150,000 worth of damage, or with a foundation damage. The whole thing was crumbling. And this is a mansion. Like, this is like the Addams Family house. It's like, a $4,000 or $5,000 house. And we found that the whole thing was crumbling. And so we're like, this, we're buying it for, I think it was like $150,000, and it had a $450,000 after repair value, but it started to just skyrocket. And so anyway, what happened with that house is we walked away, and they said, okay, they put it out to auction. Someone else bought it, and they didn't have access to it. They don't know about the foundation. So a lot of times with those tax auctions, you don't have access to the house. They're usually like boarded, depending on the states, or you're technically trespassing to go in. Like, you don't have access. So
yeah,
you're kind of taking on some risk, but there is, like, you can buy them for $500. So.
Yeah. You know what? There's a certain, before I brought Larry on as my contractor team, I was like, hey, I can only take on lipstick. And, I told somebody the other day, he sent me a deal, and I was like, I look for lipstick renovations, not liposuction. And so, the property that he was looking at sounds like what you just said. So I think that's a really keen thing. Everybody can go for the bottom line price, but is that really the amount of work that you want to get into to be able to do in the States? You know what? Not that we're not finished yet, Larry. There's still more questions. I want to be able to say now, turn this around, because here's Mandy at the border. I'm asking all these questions, and then I say, you know what, Glenn? I don't think I want to do this by myself. I want to do a joint venture. Talk to me in my in my space now. What a joint venture would look like, to be able to just say, hey, I don't want to do the research. You're obviously the expert in the U.S. investing. So what could that look like if we were to do a joint venture on a U.S. property?
Yeah, and that's one of the main reasons, because I do joint ventures, that I don't do tax deeds, at least not yet, because the risk is involved, and I'm putting the risk. I'm spreading it, because I'm still on title and everything. It's a little different in the States, because I go on title too. But I'm spreading the risk. Like, there's a lot of risk. Like, do I really want to drag somebody through the mud? Maybe if I was going to do it all myself, I would take that risk if I wanted to try and make a big, huge chunk of money, but I'm not going to do it, because that's all I need is a couple of joint ventures to go real bad and the whole thing's done, right? Yep. So I don't want to take that risk. So you want to talk structure for my joint ventures? We basically do it two different ways. Mine's a little different. What we usually do is the joint venture, the venturer, the person putting the money in, not me. They put in the money, closing costs, down payment, all those things to get the property stabilized. We usually have to pay for some appraisals, some insurance upfront. Sometimes there's a bird dog fee. And anyway, just to get the thing going.
That's like a wholesale fee? Bird dog is wholesale?
Bird dog is kind of like, it's like a second wholesale fee.
Okay.
So a bird dog is like someone who finds deals. So sometimes there is no wholesaler. Sometimes I have a girl down in Alabama who just goes and finds houses for me that have sticks in the sign, and she calls me, and if I buy them, I give her some money.
Right.
It's not a wholesale. It's kind of, sometimes there's a wholesale and a bird dog, and so it's just one of those things that. But anyway, they come up with all the money. We buy the place, we renovate the place. We usually do a refi at 6 months. We give them their money back. The additional money that's left over after giving them their money back, we split it, and we continue to cash flow it from whenever we get the renovation done.
Are both partners, you mentioned that you are on title. This is an American mortgage, and both partners, you and I would both be on title for a deal like this?
Yes, so I go on title, and I know that it saves us, I can't think of what that form's called that you have to do in Canada, the Brexit or something, I don't know what it's called. Oh.
I was waving at your son there.
Anyway, so so you made me lose my train of thought.
That's all right. It's a strike day. So are both people's names on title?
So I put both names on title. The reason is it's like if you're gonna anyone's gonna get sued or anything, but we're both names are on the corporation, and the corporation owns the property. Right. So we may as well split the risk. There's no we don't have the same things for lending. Like we're not like qualifying for the loans the same way. So we don't need to do some of the same agreements you have to do in Canada because there's only one person to protect yourself, because I am on the corporation. I am part of the whole thing. And in all honesty, I'm working on getting an E2 visa. So once I get that, I'll be treated like an American. I get American financing. So it'll be in your best interest to have me on there anyway. But anyway, for now, it saves paperwork, and everyone's on there. It's just open. Like the lenders know what's going on. I sometimes send them the JV contract, and they know what's going on. They know, and everybody's on.
Okay. Yeah. And then you look after so again, if we were to partner and I would say, hey, Glenn, here's my money. You be the expert, go down there, you find it, all this kind of stuff. We're on the mortgage together. Do you look after all the tax stuff to be able to give me what I need to be able to give to my accountant? Yeah.
I compile all that and send it off, at least for now. I keep flip-flopping about using an accountant, but I actually went to school for accounting, so I can do it. I just don't like it.
Out of your little bucket list. I recently described an investor resume, and yours I can see clear as day, your U.S. investing resume, and the reasons that you have built to be able to attract joint ventures to be able to invest in Canada, in the States, Canadians investing in the States is amazing. So Larry's like, Glenn, I value you. You've glowed. You have just glowed with information. I can tell this is a topic that you are for sure the expert on. I want to be able to make sure that everybody knows to check out your podcast. Obviously, it's a wealth of information.
Yes.
Yeah, there it is there. Watch for it on episode 100. But Joe, no, Glen's based in Cambridge, Ontario. And so that's what I love. You are me, but you've stepped into a realm that I'm certainly not an expert on, and you shed a lot of light. And you're a dad, and you work full time, and you're amazing.
Yeah. I'm a busy guy.
You know what? You know what they say? If you've got something that needs to be done, give it to a busy person, because they're the ones that know how to organize their time. And you are absolutely one that can do that. So I thank you very much, Glen, for being my guest on the show today. I thank you all for watching another episode of The Full-Time Investor. I'm Mandy Brenham. Watch for a special show tonight. I'm going to be doing an RSP information session, knowing that we're right here at RSP season. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week for another episode of The Full-Time Investor.